Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to look at two simple concepts and see how we could view them in our context. And so today we'll be looking at negotiation and confrontation, or negotiation versus confrontation. And these are two tools that have been used in different setup with a view of achieving certain objectives or certain goals. And so this is local leadership perspective, and so I want to invite you on this platform and request you to subscribe if you've not have subscribed, so that this program will be able to reach as many people as possible. Now back to our subject, negotiation versus confrontation. I don't know in which context you've had these two terms, and I don't know whether perhaps you've been able to apply it in various or different situations where you're concerned. And so, what is negotiation? Negotiation is basically the technique that is used to resolve a dispute between individuals or groups, or rather group of people. There are times when there are disputes, when there are a different opinion and there is no completely an agreement either between different persons or different groups. Then at times negotiation can be used as a tool. And so also is an exchange of dialogue involving conflicting parties with the objective to reach a common consensus. Yeah, so this involved parties, and within that party there is an exchange of dialogue with the view of reaching a common consensus. When I was reading about this subject, I came across Harvard School of Law, and in their daily blog, the under program on negotiation, they have highlighted 7 elements of negotiation, and one of them is interest. That when there are those kind of negotiation, when there are those kind of strategies that are used to resolve conflict or disputes or divergent opinion between individuals and groups, one of the elements that is always in picture is the issue of interest. And the second element they highlighted is legitimacy, and then relationships, then alternatives, and BAT. BAT, it's in capital, BATNA. It stands for base alternatives to negotiations agreement. That is alternatives and BAT, whereby there are alternatives where negotiations is concerned. And also option is also another element, and then commitment, and then communication also they brought out as an element. So this element, as if we interact or if you have had an opportunity to get involved in a dialogue or solving dispute, then these are some of the things that you will have to come across, and maybe formal or informal. And so these are some of the things that we need to think about when we are talking about negotiation in a basic way. And what about confrontation? And confrontation basically is a result of dispute or divergent in opinion. That means when there are disputes or whether there are divergence in opinion, one will choose, or a group will choose to be aggressive and hostile in terms of looking a solution to the challenge or to the cause of dispute. And American Psychological Association, they wrote something and they said that an argument, that is, in terms of defining confrontation, they says that this is an argument or hostile disagreement. And hostile disagreement. So these are two roots that whenever there is a dispute, whenever there is a disagreement, one may choose to utilize one of them. So I don't know the situation you are in as a leader. Remember, this is this is a platform where I'm talking all these things in the context of leadership. And so, in the context of leadership, and also in the context of the Kenyan current situation, where I would like to ask, what are the best options that can be taken in order to bring about common agreement or consensus, because, or even what can be done in order to salvage or at least to eventually solve the problem? Because as we understand currently in Kenya, there is a stalemate between the government and the opposition. The opposition had given an ultimatum of given number of days and a few things to be met. If they are not met, then they would call for mass action. And so in between, the government reaction to it also, I think it was more of, okay, we are not going to give in because it is on record, them responding to some of those issues. And so it appears as if the two groups are of divergent opinion. The one group feel we are already in the government, so we don't need to yield to your demand, and the other one feel we are offended, and we feel our rights have not been honored, and so our demands are not met, and they need to be met. And if this is not the case, then this is what we will result. We will eventually get involved in. So these are two kind of divergent opinion that involves leaders of these two camps. And so if this is the case, I want to believe it is at the core of leadership. And as it has always been said, it all falls on leadership. So the responsibility lies squarely on the leaders in these two different camps. So to respond to this question, that is the question of what these two people should do. I think it calls for selfless leadership, kind of a leadership that does not put their interest first, as much as it is one of the elements in negotiation. So instead of putting their own self-interest, they need to put the interest of the country first. So if they can put the interest of the country first, and if that can be a guiding principle or a framework in terms of negotiating the issue, then I believe that the result can be different. But if the interest has to do with themselves, self-interest centered kind of approach, then I doubt whether the problem is going to be solved. And I want to believe that indeed these two camps, that they are not there advocating, or they seem not to be agitated or fighting for their own selfish interest, but I believe they're fighting for their interest of the larger Kenya. Though we know in politics it's all about interest and self-interest, but where leadership is concerned, we want a kind of leadership that calls for what falls within the category of the interest of everybody. So one, we will need selfless leadership, and then if these teams, either of these team prefers negotiation, then I want to believe they will need to shed off some of the people from their team, especially within the circle of that negotiation, because there are people who may completely take a firm stand because they believe if the option of negotiation is initiated, then they start to lose. So they would rather prefer the status quo or the confrontation approach. And so this is something that both of the camps, especially the leadership, need to think about it, because within their groups, there are people who are very firm and they may not want to take that kind of an approach. And also, there are those who may just completely want to take the confrontation approach, maybe because they think it is going to benefit them in one way or the other. Or the government may say, we are already the government, why should we yield? The opposition will say, okay, you're not willing to yield, but we feel that these are our concerns must be met. And so we need to think which option is good, but whichever option either of this team prefers, then I believe there are a number of people around them that will need to be cut off, so as to safeguard the process and to ensure the process goes on well. And what will be the impact of negotiation or confrontations? I believe, and I've done a video before, and I have advocated for negotiation where this dispute and stalemate is concerned. And I said I am in agreement with the governor of Nairobi when he said the best thing is for the two leaders to meet, and so that they can talk out issues. And I believe this will be the best option. And so if there will be negotiation, I believe, and if it is done in goodwill and in good faith, then I believe the outcome will be good, and so the stalemate can be solved or salvaged, for that matter. And what about confrontation? If the two camps decide to go the confrontational way, as what we've already seen is happening, that will be disastrous to either of the team, because I believe the government will not want a situation where they are mired with integrity issues. For example, when people goes to the street, they may be tempted to use force. They may attempted to use orthodox means to contain the masses, and that probably may result to some dying, people getting injured, resources getting looted, and quite a number of things that may not be quite favorable. So these are impacts of confrontation, and the other team may feel, okay, well, we are here, so we have to spoil for them. We must not give them a chance to succeed. And so what is important, even as we think about the impact of negotiation and confrontation, what are the real issue at hand that's supposed to be discussed, so or looked into? I believe if there is good faith in either of these camps, then something can happen. And let us not wait until that time when things are already out of hand, and even whereby it becomes difficult, and even where now we need to involve other people, either from other countries, because these are things that we can solve. These are things we can solve, and we should not wait for them to go out of hand. These are things that these leaders can meet and talk and agree on the way forward. And talking does not necessarily mean that they share the government. Talking does not necessarily mean as much as politics is dynamic and some of those things may come up, but it may be that they need to meet, talk, and address all these issues. Whether they are issues to do with the cost of living, they can be addressed. If it has to do with the issues of IBC, it can be addressed. If it has to do with issues of server, they can address all these things, and I believe there can be a way forward, especially if the negotiation approach is taken instead of a confrontational approach. So in conclusion, I want to pray and hope that they will go the negotiation approach instead of confrontational approach, because when you compare the impact of either, then the impact of confrontation are not quite pleasing. And so, as much as I understand, sometimes in leadership, confrontation is needed, and sometimes it can be a positive thing. But in this context, we would rather choose to go the negotiation way. And I believe that it shall be well with every one of us, and it shall be well with Kenya. So it lies squarely on our leaders, and so they need to take a sober decision, and they need to decide what is good for the country, but not for themselves or for their groups. The King bless Kenya, and the King bless the leadership of Kenya, and let's meet in the next recording.